Okay, in the last video I covered the lettering, how to input lettering and how to change your font. In this video I'm going to go through the other options in the lettering dialog box, and then we'll move on to some editing at a later stage. So as I said before in my previous video, the fonts in the version 9 software have the size range that is recommended for that font shown next to the font, which is very handy. So it is advisable, if you're using the London font, for instance, that you only have it as small as 15 millimeters high and don't go any higher than 25 millimeters. The reason for these size ranges is for the stitch out to be nice. So if you go outside that range, you may encounter stitching problems. By default, the software sets the height at 14 millimeters. So bearing that in mind, you may wish to change the height here before you start. And it's easy to see which range you should fit into by looking at the font and then changing your height to be within that range. If the height you want is not in the range in that font, then you might want to choose a different font. Every font has its own size ranges. As you can see, the neon caps can go from 18 to 75 millimeters high. So there are some very small fonts too, and there are some excuse me, run fonts, which is just running stitches, and they can go quite small too, 5 millimeters in height. Now, if you haven't got version 9 and you want to know those size ranges, you have to go to the user reference manual. And you do that by coming up here to the help button and come down to the reference manual, it's the second one down, and just right click on that. It should open, provided you've got Adobe Reader on your computer so that it can read it. And you need to come down to the appendices, expand that out, and if you keep coming down, you will see that you have embroidery fonts. Expand that out, and you can actually jump straight to the Roman character fonts or the special character fonts or the non-Roman character fonts, but it will just go straight to the heading embroidery fonts here. So if we click on that, and again you've got shortcuts to here, these red headings will take you to the type of font rather than having to scroll page by page down. There's some information here about what they're describing in the samples they're going to show you, so you might want to read that too. But as you scroll down, all the fonts are listed with a sample, and then on the right hand side here you've got the recommended minimum size in both inches and millimeters. So my software was showing millimeters in the lettering. I believe if I had my software set to US, which is inches, it may have shown the inches. I haven't tested that, but if it doesn't, then you have trouble converting to inches, you can always come to the reference manual and find it here. So you've got minimum and maximum height sizes, and then these letters down here are the join method. So CJ stands for closest join, for instance. There is one that goes along the bottom. Was that A, D? I'm not sure. Let's just have a look up here because it tells you here. There. So A, D are letters joined the same way they were originally digitized. Oh, so originally digitized, and bottom join, where the join is always along the baseline, is BJ. So if you see those initials down here, that's how the letters join up. So there's a little bit more information here, but really in most cases you just want to use the default join method anyway, or you will be using the default join method for those letters. So you can just close that when you finish looking, You could probably print those pages out from the manual if you don't have version 9, so that you can have them as a ready reference to check your sizes. So that's the height size. The width will stay proportionately as you change the size. So if I change this size to 10, for instance, and you can use the arrows or you can type over. So if I go 10 and apply that, applying means that the effects will take place, but it doesn't close the dialog box. So it's always a good idea to use apply until you've finished doing everything you want to do, and then hit OK. So the width is still going to be 100% of a 10mm height. You're not making it any narrower or higher. If you change the percentage, it will make the stitches narrower in proportion to the height, or wider. I don't know if you can go, well, they've got an up arrow, so I presume you can go wider than the original. Italic is pretty self-explanatory. You can put your letters on a lean, depending on the font as well, I think, there. So you can try that. That's just the angle of the letters. The letter spacing, 1.4mm. I usually don't play with, italic, I don't often do italic writing either, but I don't really play with the spacing here because it will set it at what it needs for the font, and if there are any issues, you can adjust it in the editing later. Auto kerning, you can turn that on. It will only work if the font has kerning included in the font. So it won't really work with embroidered fonts, I don't think. It works more with the TrueType fonts. That some TrueType fonts have a kerning written in, which will help adjust things such as letters being a little bit too close together or far apart, depending on the letters. So if you've got a double L, sometimes they can be too close together. So some people who make fonts can write into the font program a way of making sure that they don't get too close together or too far apart with some capitals and then lower letters. But again, you can manually adjust any issues in the editing later. Okay, so let's choose a font and write a word so we can see what we are doing. So I'm just going to choose a font from the embroidery fonts, and I'll choose Alice. And let's say, hello world. I'm going to use my return key, so I go to a new line, so that's your enter key. And how is your day? So you can do multiple lines, or you can digitize those separately, but we can break them apart anyway later. So type in the whole thing you want to do. I better put a question mark there. And it says between 10 and 20mm, so the 14mm height, you notice that didn't change when I changed the font, so this height is by default on 14mm, and if you change it, it will stay that way until you change it again or start a new lettering project. So just keep an eye on that height. I'm going to leave it at the 14mm, which falls within the range. We're not going to change anything else. I'm going to apply all of that, and I need to go okay. Oh, I wonder if I can. Oh, I can actually click on this on the workspace without clicking on OK. So my dialog box will stay open. You may not want to do that, but you may want to, so that you can fiddle around a little bit. So here is my lettering object. Now, I better swap that over to the other side for a minute. Let me just bring my writing over this side. All right. So as I said in my last video as well, this is one object. So if I select it, the whole object will select. If I go out of true view, you'll see that because it'll all turn pink. I deselect it, it goes back to the normal colour. If there's no way I can select each word individually at this stage, I'll just reselect it again. That's in colour blocks mode. So if I go back to individual objects, it's just one object. That's the nature of lettering. Now, as I said before, there are a few more things here. So we can have a justification to the left, to the right. So if I click on that one and go apply, it will justify to the right, to the center, apply, and you can even spread it out so that it covers the whole page, apply. So you've got all those options. I'll just bring it back to left justification and apply. And again, I'm just applying so I keep my box open so I can play. The other thing is your baseline. So you have a straight baseline, which is the default. And that line can be changed, the angle of it, but it is a straight line. So when you can, with the reshaping tool, change the angle so you can have it all on a slope. It basically rotates all the writing to the angle that you change it to. The next one is a circle clockwise. So that puts the writing on the top of the arc. It basically creates a circle and sits the writing on the top outside of the circle. So if I click on that and apply, and it's got a default radius of how big the circle is. That's 50 millimeters. So if I click on that and apply, as you can see, the circle is quite small for this bit of writing. So, and because I had 2 rows of writing, I've got this up the top here and this close to the circle. The circle's only this big, so that doesn't look very attractive. I can change that radius to 75 and see if that helps. 75 millimeters. Apply, and as you can see, yes, that's much less of an arc. However, you can also adjust that in the reshape tool rather than having to guess at the radius. But in this case, 75 is probably a better starting point for this. The circle counterclockwise, CCW, puts the writing at the bottom of the arc. So if I select that one and apply, and it's gone down here, so we'll just bring it back up here again. So this time the circle's up above it and it's come down the bottom, and we've got a smiley face arc. The next tool along is the Any Shape tool. Now you can't apply that retrospectively to an existing lettering object. You need to choose that before you type in. So at the moment I've got hello world, how was your day selected, so that's what's showing in my little box here. But if I click off, then nothing's selected. I can now type in here. So I can choose my Any Shape and I can type in here. I'm going to type it all in one line because that way it will be more, it will be able to go along a longer line. So hello world, how is your day? Question mark. So that's all in one line now, and if I click apply, I can then digitize the line I want to put it along. So if I left click, right click, right click, right click, right click, left click, enter, you can see that the lettering follows the line I've made. Now you don't want to get too extreme with your curves with this line, because as you can see, if you're going too tightly around a curve, the letters will start to overlap because the base is made along the line and they angle according to that. It is possible to rotate them slightly if you've just got a small problem in the reshape tool. Just zoom in again to that. All right. I'll click off so that nothing's selected. Now, I'll just reselect that. You can, if you look here at the options, there is one more option, a vertical option. If I click off, there's actually another option here too. So if you want to use this last option, you need to have nothing selected as well. So this is another do before you apply. Let's see if I can apply this free line vertical to this hello world, how is your day? Because it was there. So I'll select it and apply, and yes, it does do it. So what that does is put it on a vertical line. Now, depending on what you actually want and what font you use, it's not all that readable necessarily. In fact, the L's here nearly run into each other, so it looks like one long line. But with certain fonts and certain simple words, that might be an option you want for a particular project. So that is available there. Okay, so with the predefined, you have 3 lines of text. They could just be 3 letters, or they could be 3 words, or they could be more than a word on each line, but you need 3 lines of text. So let's start with hello world today. So we're going to go hello. We're going to hit our enter or return button to go to the second line and put world, and hit our enter button again to get to the third line. And we've got 3 words there, so we can apply and click on our workspace, and we can make our circle as big as we want. So you left click on your workspace and you will have the circle tool, and if you hold your control key down, that will restrict your angle of your circle to 15-degree angles. It'll jump as you move your cursor. So if you want a horizontal line for your circle, that's sometimes easier to work with later on. Then you can left click to complete your circle. And if you want a circle rather than an ellipse, you would then hit enter. But if you want an ellipse, you can define a height of the arcs. So let's use an ellipse this time and hit enter. And they weren't very long words, so it's very hard to see that they're on an arc, but I'm sure you get the idea. You can see that today is starting to curve. The world is on a straight line and the hello is on a curve as well. So of course with longer words, yes, so individual letters, you wouldn't really notice a difference. So it's really comes into its own with longer words. You could put somebody's name, their first name, middle name and surname at the bottom, something like that. But longer words or a smaller arc. So let's undo that and do a smaller arc. So we've got our predefined. We'll come in here. Hello world today. Whoops, backspace and return. Return. And let's go apply. And actually a tighter arc, so a circle would work, would show that up better. So I'm going to left click and hold my control key down and left click and just hit my enter button, and that will make it a circle rather than an ellipse, and you can see the arcs are quite pronounced in that example. Not a very good font for that example, so I could, well that's, and I can't change the font by the looks of it, so if I click off and select the font, I can select each individual word. In this instance, with this exercise, with this tool of the predefined. Let's see if I can select them all, but they won't appear in here, so I can't change the font. Well, the words aren't appearing in here, but the fonts are here. Let me try and change the font. Let me change it to London. There we go, London, and apply. You can change the font. But because this line is so short, the word world has all been squashed on top of each other. So the type of font, the size of the circle, the length of the words all affect how this actually works. And I'm sure we can reshape that as well to make a bigger circle. But I'll be looking at all the reshape options in the next video. Okay, so that covers all the buttons on here. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to get part 3.